According to the famous Pew Research Center for Statistics, the number of Internet users worldwide in 1995 was about 50 million, most of whom were from institutions in industrialized countries. But just 20 years later, by 2015, the number of Internet users reached 3.5 billion. 8 more years passed, and by the end of 2023, the number of users had reached 5 billion and 300 million. So, what would happen if the Internet were to suddenly cut off from the entire world? Hello, I'm Katana, but before we begin, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you can receive our videos as soon as they're posted. First, before answering the question, we need to ask another question. Is it actually possible for the Internet to go down for the entire world one day? Can a major catastrophe happen, like a massive earthquake or a nuclear war, that would lead to a complete Internet outage worldwide? The truth is, the answer to this question is that as long as the Earth is still here, the Internet will continue. First of all, the Internet is not a trend that will eventually fade away. The Internet is like water and electricity. Our dependence on it has become vital in all aspects of modern life. Even if someone tries to shut down the Internet globally through deliberate sabotage, they wouldn't be able to unless something catastrophic, like a giant asteroid hitting Earth, were to happen. In that case, it wouldn't matter whether the Internet existed or not because we probably wouldn't be around. But as we said, if no catastrophic event occurs, the Earth will continue, and so will the Internet. The reason for this is the structure of the Internet itself, the way cables are laid, and the distribution of servers around the world. The Internet operates as a network spread across the entire planet. In fact, it even exists in space through satellites. A country can block a few websites or services or shut down the Internet entirely within its borders, but that would still be a matter confined to its own borders. There could also be significant outages that cut the Internet for several countries, not just one, and this has actually happened several times. One of the most famous incidents was in 2008 when a major submarine cable was cut, disrupting the Internet in several countries in the Indian subcontinent. However, in the end, these were all outages, and everything was fixed eventually. What we discussed above shows that our question is merely a hypothetical and imaginary one so that no one has to worry. The Internet will continue. So, let's assume there is a button that, if pressed, would cut off the Internet for the entire world. According to researchers, if the Internet were to go down completely for a week, there would be some minor economic disasters, but it would pass. Some institutions and companies could suffer losses amounting to billions of dollars, especially if they rely entirely on the Internet, such as Meta, Google, or Amazon. However, all institutions, regardless of their activities, whether in the economy, trade, or even security, would face losses, but ultimately everyone would be able to recover and continue. The world wouldn't end or be destroyed if it were to live without the Internet for a week. The real problem arises if the duration exceeds that. The most affected group would be Internet addicts. This group has become so dependent on the Internet that we could say their reliance has reached a pathological state. The absence of the Internet would have a huge impact on this group, especially with the loss of the communication methods they have become accustomed to. Whether through the cessation of social media platforms, online games, or anything else that requires the Internet to operate. The moral damages would be significant, and researchers indicate that there will be reports of people wanting to harm themselves. For many, the Internet is literally their entire life, and its absence would create a huge void that many would struggle to endure. Now, if we get serious and talk about the impact of the absence of the Internet on service sectors in general, we'll see that, for instance, the transportation sector would face massive disruptions. Keep in mind that the transportation sector alone could cause complete paralysis in the world. Transportation is what takes people to work and allows them to manage their affairs. Since the Internet has now entered this sector significantly, the first thing that would be affected is self-driving cars and electric vehicles. In fact, some researchers say that any type of vehicle would be affected. This is simply because all traffic, navigation, and fuel systems currently depend on digital systems and the Internet. For example, electronic gates at city borders wouldn't open without the Internet, and the vast majority of traffic signals within cities wouldn't work. Of course, this would lead to accidents and traffic jams everywhere, which would in turn affect the whole world. Now, let's move on to another type of transportation, airplanes. Nowadays, airplanes are almost entirely dependent on navigation systems connected to the Internet. So, if the Internet were to completely go down, planes likely wouldn't take off from airports, especially since one of the most important stages of a flight is the logistical preparations, which rely on systems that use the Internet to connect their devices together. So, if the Internet is down, this capability would be completely removed. In short, without the Internet, there wouldn't be any preparations, and all airports would collapse. Moreover, this is not the only thing that airports depend on the Internet for instance, reservations, weather information, landing and takeoff data, baggage weights. Everything is constantly updated and connected through the Internet. So, we can't suddenly revert to the age of faxes, regular phones, and standard mail to coordinate something like an airport. Apart from the fact that the old infrastructure is no longer in place, the demands of the current age, along with the increase in population and the rise in air travel and the number of airplanes, cannot be accommodated with old speeds. By choosing something related to aviation and air travel, profits for companies, hotels, and all that would return to the 1980s. And we have long since left the 1980s behind, half a century ago. Now, regarding e-commerce, this is something that explains itself. Anyone who relies on the internet for trade and work would completely disappear from the financial market and the global economy, from YouTube creators to the largest companies like Meta and Amazon. This could reach the strongest countries, as their entire economies would collapse due to the end of the e-commerce era, especially a country like the United States, which relies on the digital economy for 33% of its gross domestic product. Let's now touch on something that the entire global financial system relies on: banks. Do you remember the beginning of the crisis between Ukraine and Russia? The West was threatening Russia with what? If any of you were following the events, you surely heard the phrase, the SWIFT system. SWIFT is simply a global system for bank transfers between countries. The West was threatening Russia that it would cut off its access to this system, thus preventing it from buying and selling. Now, imagine if the SWIFT system were to shut down for the entire world, not just Russia. There's no doubt that a complete collapse of the global economy would occur, and many countries would be affected. For example, China would incur losses of about $6 billion, while Japan would face losses of around $2.8 billion, with the United States at the top, suffering $11 billion in losses. That's it, we've reached the end. If you've made it this far, you're the best. Please give us a like before you go so we know how many people reached the end. And don't forget, if you have any questions that you want us to make a video about, write them down in the comments below the video. Peace.